Hey guys, my mission today is to tell you that words are overrated and how we use them is awful. Alright, let's start at the beginning. Let's think babies for a minute. Babies are born, they're all sweet and wonderful. And what do? Well, they learn to think and they learn to feel. And those two things need to be in a really good relationship with each other. But my point isn't so much that. My point is when you look at babies, they don't learn to talk immediately. It's just not a priority. Far more important for them is the ability to learn to think and to feel and how the two interact. And let's look at a few other things that are really important in terms of defining who we are, in terms of our development as humans and so on. Memories. Think of memories, for instance, ever so powerful. We have extremely powerful memories. Every single one of us does. We think back of certain things and it makes us feel things. It makes us think things. It makes us terrified maybe, or it reinforces something or whatever. Very powerful. What else is powerful as far as we go as humans in our sort of brain capacity? Images, extremely powerful. Advertising has understood this. I mean, they work with images. I always think of some VW commercials over the years, over the decades. Even in the early days of using images, powerful images as opposed to words in advertising, VW was right at the forefront of that. Images are incredibly powerful. They impress us. They do something to us. Stories are important. I remember one of the first commercials I ever saw. It was about dish liquid on German television decades ago. And it was just a story. It wasn't really about the dish liquid at all. And that was the genius of it. It was the storytelling. It's like every couple of days, the story moved forward a bit. And in the morning in the local bakery, people would talk about it. Hey, did you see that commercial last night? Wonder what's going to happen next? That kind of thing. And it was basically about this beautiful young woman who had no luck in love. And she lived by herself and things would, go wrong and be disappointing and so on. And then at some point, she figured out what the problem was. She was using the wrong dish soap. And because of that, the guys that she had in her apartment on dates, they would take a sip of wine and it just never happened. It never came out right. And once she figured that out and she got the right dish soap, everything was hunky-dory. There you go. It's the story. It's not about how much does this thing cost, what color is it, where can I buy it? No, people figure that out. It's the story that matters. We know that babies are in a more urgent quest for proper thinking and feeling than they are in their pursuit of language. That comes later, maybe when they're a year old. Okay, it starts sooner, of course, but that's, when words start appearing and so on. Memories are very powerful. Images are very powerful. Stories are very powerful. Thoughts. Human thoughts are incredibly powerful. They literally make sense, if you see what I mean. Even when they don't make sense in a particular case, they're still, in the sense, making business. Some of you love words and you love etymologies and you want to trace them back and so on. That is all very cool. There's no problem with that. My issue is simply to say, if people end up overrating words, they will misinterpret. And to interpret well is the best thing we can do in life. If we don't interpret well, we're in trouble in all areas of life. Okay, so that is really what I'm after here. So how do words come into it? Do they matter? Well, I'm a PhD advisor, so when students submit something to me and there's a problem with words, I hate it. So it's not that this stuff doesn't matter to me, it does. But the even more important stuff is, how are they thinking and what are they processing and where's this going and what is it doing and, how much does it show critical awareness, etc., etc., etc. All right, so words are like, how can I put this? Words are basically like paper bags. You go to the grocery store and you buy stuff. And then at the end, hopefully you're not going to put it in plastic. Hopefully you're going to put it in paper bags. So you got those paper bags and you put all your stuff in there. You carry it to the car, you drive home, you carry it into the house, you put it in your pantry. You eat some of it, you probably bought way too much. And ultimately you'll throw it away. Guess what? When you throw it away, whatever you haven't consumed, you're going to put it probably in paper bags and you carry it to the garbage bin. And Words are useful in the same manner as paper bags are useful for bagging groceries or holding trash or starting a fire or something like that. Kind of like suitcases. You know, you go on vacation with a suitcase, you get on that plane, you go to the big island of Hawaii or somewhere, and you end up in your hotel or in your Airbnb or whatever. That suitcase is going to be in the way. You don't want it. You don't need it. You just want to lose it for a few days until you need it again to come back. And then you put your stuff back in there. It's the stuff that goes in there that really matters. You know, if you are a scuba diver, it's the scuba diving gear that matters, not the suitcase. It only holds it together on the way there and then on the way back. In the meantime, the suitcase, you want to lose it in a corner somewhere and not see it. Words are like that suitcase. Words are not the stuff inside. Words are the suitcase. They're secondary. They could be helpful. Some suitcases are helpful and some are not. You know, the ones with really cool wheels that you can kind of push upright and you have to expend no energy at all. They're great. And then there are others like the old ones and they're awful. So there's helpful and not so helpful. Same with words. We can use them well or not, but they're not the thing. That is my point. They're not the thing. And coming back to the question of Christians, here is the problem. So many Christians seem to think that words are a thing. You have to use the right words for stuff, otherwise you're in trouble. That is a problem. Words are just the shell. Words are not the inside. These clothes here, this, by the way, is the first time in my life that I'm wearing a denim jacket. And I don't even know whose it is. I found it. Somebody must have stayed here at some point and left it. I have no idea. And I realize it sounds a little bit like a college, dorm party or something. No, I don't know. I don't know where this comes from. I've never worn anything like this before, but I thought this is a great time to wear it because I am not about this. And thoughts and memories and images and stories are also not about words. That is my point. Words are not a thing, but we need things. We need the thing. Just like that scuba diving gear in Hawaii, that's what you really need. So what are we going to do? Well, I told you that I think that our use of words is a disaster. Now let me illustrate that to you just briefly, and then we're going to think about how to move forward. So here's an example from the Christian world, yes, and it involves a word that gets thrown around a lot in Christian services and Christian thinking and commentaries and in books in your church bookstore and all the rest of it. And here it goes. It's a Greek word. It shows up in the New Testament a bunch of times, and the word is ecclesia. Ecclesia. And if you're a real geek, you're going to call all things related to church life ecclesiological. Same word, ecclesia. I want to just use that for a second to illustrate how much we've lost it with words. And not just, quote unquote common people, but academics too. It's quite astonishing. And I can document that for you. I'm obviously not the first one to document this. Plenty of people who've done it. But the academy still keeps doing it. Christian seminaries still keep doing this stuff. So what am I talking about? Well, here we go. So the word ecclesia, so the argument goes, and this is extremely widespread. The word ecclesia, according to this argument, falls into two parts. There's a first part, ek means out of. There's a second part, ecclesia, something to do with being called. And then you put the two back together again. So first you break it apart, then you put it back together again. And now supposedly Christians who are called an ecclesia in the New Testament, Christians supposedly are the called out ones. Called out from what? Called out from the world. Maybe that explains why, so many Christians are quite happy to meet within their separate quarters, some church building somewhere where nobody else ever goes unless maybe repair people or whatever. Maybe it's the use of ecclesia that has contributed to that kind of thinking. Or maybe that kind of thinking was already there and this just seems a convenient way to underpin it. But here's the problem. The word ecclesia, even if you break it into those two parts, that meaning, when you then take the separate meanings and you put it back together again, it was never used like that. It was never actually used like that. It was never used with that concept attached to it. The thing is, concepts do not attach to words anyway. Concepts are thoughts. Words are paper bags. Remember, it's the groceries we need, not the paper bag. So what has happened with the word ecclesia is that people have developed entire ecclesiologies, big doctrinal treatises talking about church, what church should look like. And often this kind of thinking is at its core. Christians are called out of the world. They're sort of separate from the world. That's nonsense. The New Testament says the opposite. Yes, the New Testament says you should meet, but not to separate from the world. Yes, you should be different in your priorities, but not separate from the world. So here's an explanation, or here's an illustration, I should say. So some years ago, as I'm in Minneapolis, some years ago, the bridge fell down. Remember, the big bridge in Minneapolis fell down. Obviously, a very big deal. And a lot of people died, and it was very sad. And as I'm watching this on TV, there's this guy, some TV station is interviewing him, and is saying, like, what happened? What happened? And the guy said, we need to understand, and we don't. Right now, we do not understand what happened. We must understand that bridge because there are many others just like it. We must understand that bridge. And I'm thinking to myself, and this is me being the hermeneutics guy. I was thinking, understand. I wonder how many people hear the word understand and then think, the guy must be thinking that what we need to do is we need to get into the water under the debris of the bridge and sort of find a spot where we can stand up. And now the debris is sort of over us and now we're understanding the bridge. How many people would have thought that? Well, you've guessed it, 0. Nobody. Well, I did. Not seriously, I was just wondering how many people are thinking that. And of course, I thought to myself, nobody. Nobody would. Then why on earth are we doing that very thing that we would never do with the word understand and a gazillion other words? Why are we doing that with the word ecclesia, which is never used in that, in that sense of breaking it down and out and called out of. You put it back together. Christians are supposed to be called out of the world. The church is supposed to be separate from the world, that kind of thing. No, the word was never used like that. It's the concept, it's the thought, it's the memories, it's the images, it's the stories. Those are the things that impact us. Those are the things that shape us. Those are the things that make life worth living. Words don't even get a foot in the door. They're massively overrated in Christian circles. And just down the hall here, I've got a library and there are thousands and thousands of books. And about half of them are concerned with words. No wonder they don't make a difference in this world. I don't even know why I have them. I guess I have them because the Theological Academy determined that to make meaning or to make sense requires attention to words. And I'm not saying it doesn't. And yes, I learned the languages, ancient and modern, that are necessary to be, to do what I do professionally. Yes, but those things are massively overrated. We should have been learning neuroscience. A little less language, a little more neuroscience. I would recommend that to any theology professor in any school or seminary. I would recommend it to any pastor. But pastors already, they have their hands full already. But if they had been taught that kind of stuff in seminary, this kind of integrative stuff, this kind of cross-disciplinary stuff, they would have a little bit of an easier time doing what they need to do in their communities. Meanwhile, you look at churches and you see people saying in, sermons or in Bible studies or whatever, okay, as we think about church, we need to think about the word ecclesia, and then they chop it in half and there you go. And then they come up with something that the Bible would look at, the New Testament would look at and say, what just happened here? There's no basis for this whatsoever. And a linguist worth his or her salt would look at this and say, this is nuts. We wouldn't do it with normal language. Why do we do it with theological language? And the answer, of course, is A, because we don't have many critical thinking skills. And that's a reflection of our education in general, unfortunately. And secondly, it suits us just perfectly. By us, I mean the institutions. It suits the institutions just perfectly to mount this kind of bizarre argument about ecclesia and say, look, that's why we are the way we are. We're called out. We need this campus, and we need to meet here, and we need to bring people in here. After all, this is expensive. Somebody has to pay for it. Blah, 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 blah. You know what the word ecclesia actually meant in the New Testament? It means crowd, a crowd of people. C-R-O-W-D, a crowd of people. You see, the normal word that was used, that was in circulation at the time among those who consider themselves to be God's people, the normal word used was synagogue. Synagogue. You know, when people meet as synagogue, it doesn't have to be a building. It could have been just, initially it was in houses and so on. Now, the New Testament very carefully does not use that word for Christian gatherings. Why? Because the New Testament is insistent that the true fulfillment of that notion of God's people from the Old Testament that somehow sort of mediated over a couple hundred years to the time of Jesus via the synagogue, that notion of God's people being gathered needs to be redefined with respect to Jesus. A word that we use there is Christocentric, Christocentrically defined. But it's not the word that matters, it's the concept, that we get the concept. So it made a lot of sense for the New Testament to use a word other than synagogue, because the moment you call this synagogue, everybody goes, oh, it's that. No, it's not that. It's this. It used to be that, but now it's this. And let's use a word for this. And you know the word that the New Testament started using for that, ecclesia, it's a street term. There's nothing holy or sacred about it. There's nothing technical about it. And when theologians later come along and they turn it into this quasi-pseudo, really, technical thing about the church, the called out ones, that is nuts on many levels, but it's also inexcusable because it is used as a way of underpinning an understanding of church that is really not at all what Jesus was about or what the first Christians were about. And that is where our use of words can really be so counterproductive. I mean, think about it. Where does all the money go to support our ecclesias? Well, it stays right there. It supports our ecclesias, our campuses and whatnot, instead of being in use for the sake of the world. Want to hear something funny? The same people who take the word ecclesia and chop it in half in the interest of church politics do not do that when it comes to the word apostle. Because you see, that word could also be chopped in half and it would mean literally sent away. And the funny thing about that is Jesus did actually tell the disciples to go out into the world, but they didn't care for that. They wanted the temple. They wanted what most of us want today. So they didn't do it. They didn't go out. They stayed in Jerusalem. Read Acts. It's all there. So why do the same church leaders who chop up the word ecclesia not do the same thing with apostle? Because it doesn't suit their agenda. It's a funny world.